Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. On this topic of taking an oath against somebody, what about this example? If one person says to his guest who visits him, Wallahi, you will enter this house first. So he wants his guest to enter the house before he does. And his guest does not enter the house first, rather, he forces the host to enter the house first. Has the host broken his oath? Well, not necessarily, because what appears to be the case here is that the host only said this, meaning he only took this oath as a means of ikram or honoring the guest. He did not do this as a means of obligating the guest, which is ilzam. So notice there's a difference between ikram and ilzam. If it was ilzam, to obligate somebody, and that somebody does not do what you wanted him to do, then yes, you have broken the oath. But if your intention is ikram, then this is basically like saying, Wallahi, I will honor you. And this honoring has taken place. And this is the opinion of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, that if the intention is honoring, then he does not break the oath, and there is no hinth, so there is no kafara. But if it is ilzam, then there is a kafara upon the one who takes this oath. What about a divorce situation? If a man says to his wife, if you speak to Zayd, you are divorced. Does the divorce occur? Well, the answer here is that if his intention is to prevent his wife from speaking to Zayd, and he threatens her with divorce, then the divorce does not occur because that was not his intention. Rather, we say this counts as a yameen. So it's as if he says, Wallahi, you will not speak to Zayd. Now, if she speaks to Zayd, then he has to offer the kafara. On the other hand, if the man's intention is in fact to divorce, then we say, okay, if she speaks to Zayd, then the divorce has occurred. This type of condition is different to if the man was to say, when the sun rises tomorrow, you are divorced. Here, we cannot say this is an oath, because we know of a surety that the sun will rise tomorrow, so therefore this would be a divorce. Whereas with the example of speaking to Zayd, then this may or may not happen. So the Zayd example has two possibilities, but the sun rising example only has one possibility, and that is the sun will rise, and when the sun rises, as the man says, you will be divorced, so she is divorced. Sometimes there could be a dispute as to what the oath is referring to, what it means. And so in order to understand this oath which a person takes, we have certain phases, or port of calls if you like. So the first port of call is the intention of the one who takes the oath. And this topic pertains to the wording used in the oath. Because sometimes we could have a dispute over what the wording means. So the first point is that we look at the intention of the one taking the oath. What do you intend with your words? And the evidence for this, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَّا نَوَى. The famous hadith which everyone knows. So for example, if a man says, Wallahi, I will only sleep on a firash tonight. Firash means bed or a mattress. Then if he was to go out and sleep on the pavement, let's say, has he broken the oath? Well, you might say yes, but he could argue no, he hasn't, because Allah Jalla wa Ala says in the Quran, الَّذِي جَعَلَ لَكُمُ الْأَرْضَ فِرَاشًا, the one who has made the earth as a firash for you, or as a bed for you. So he says, yes, I did sleep on a bed. The earth is a bed. It is a firash, as Allah Jalla wa Ala says so. Therefore, I have kept my oath. So here we would have to allow him, because the word firash does allow for this interpretation, and hence he does have the right to have this intention that the firash is the earth, because the Arabic language allows him to have this intention, because it allows for this flexibility of interpretation. Contrast that though with this example. He says, Wallahi, I will not buy khubz today. And then he goes and buys khubz, which means bread. And then somebody says to him, oh no, you have to offer the kafara now, you broke the oath. And then he turns around and says, no, with khubz I actually meant a necklace. Well, the Arabic language does not allow for this flexibility. Hence, it is impossible for him to have made this intention. So we would not go by his intention in this case, because the Arabic language does not have this flexibility of interpretation. What if he says, I will only sleep under a saqaf, which means a roof, and then he sleeps outside, not underneath any roof? Has he broken the oath? Not necessarily, because he could say that Allah has made the sky a saqaf, a roof. He says in the Quran, وَجَعَلْنَا السَّمَاءَ سَقَفًا مَحْفُوظًا. We have made the sky as a preserved roof. So because there is this flexibility, we say, yes, we go by your intention, and hence you have not broken the oath. Then the second port of call, if we cannot determine the intention, would be the sabab, or the cause for which he takes the oath. So why did he take the oath? What moved him to take this oath? This is the sabab. For example, if a man is told that his son is associating with an evil person, and the man says, Wallahi, I will not speak to my son as long as he is speaking to this evil person. Let's call this evil person Zayd. So the father says, Wallahi, I will not speak to my son as long as he is associating with Zayd. Then he realizes that Zayd, in fact, is not an evil person. He is a very righteous person. So if he now speaks to his son, will he have broken the oath? The answer here is no. Why is this? Because of the sabab. We ask ourselves, what moved this man to making this oath? It was because he thought that Zayd was an evil person. So this was the sabab. But it turns out that this is not in fact the case. In fact, the one who told him that Zayd was an evil person, that informer himself was an evil person, far from Zayd being an evil person. So because the sabab did not turn out as he thought it was, and he speaks to his son because of that, he has not broken the oath, because we have to go by the sabab, or the cause of the oath. Similarly, for example, a man says, Wallahi, I will not travel to such and such a country. And he says this because he believes that country to be a country of much evil. But then he finds out that this is a country of much good. So if he now was to travel, would he then break his oath? The answer is no, and the reason is the same, because of the sabab. It turned out other than what he thought. Or for example, let's say after a few months of making this oath, a new ruler comes in and he's a righteous person and transforms the country around into a righteous country. Then if he was to travel, he would not be breaking the oath because the sabab, or the cause for which he made that oath, is no longer present. So if the cause is not present, then the ruling of the oath is no longer present either. The third port of call is the specific item in the oath. So if he does not have a particular intention nor a particular sabab, then we look at the specific item of the oath involved. So for example, he says, Wallahi, I will not wear this shirt, and he points to this specific shirt. But what if he takes this shirt and wears it as an izar? We say that he has broken the oath because he specified that shirt, that he will not wear it. And the point is that he wore it, albeit like an izar and not like a shirt, but the material itself he wore, and so he has broken the oath. Or for example, if he says, Wallahi, I will not speak to this child, and the child is obviously young, let's say he's 7 years old, then after some years he becomes an adult. Is the man now allowed to speak to this child, who is now an adult? Well, if he does so, then he has broken the oath because he specified this particular person. For example, if he says, Wallahi, I will not speak to the husband of this woman, but then after a few months, this husband divorces the woman, so he's no longer the husband of this woman. Is the oath taker now allowed to speak to him? The answer is no. Or if he does, he would have to offer the kafara because he's broken the oath, because he specified that particular man. Or for example, if he was to say, Wallahi, I will not eat these rutab, which are the succulent dates, but then after a while, these succulent dates dry up and they become tamar, which are dried dates. Is he now allowed to eat these dried dates? The answer is no, because he specified these rutab, these succulent dates. Or for example, if he says he will not speak to the friend of Zayd, but then Zayd's friend breaks up with him. So if he now speaks to his former friend, he would have broken the oath because he has specified that particular person. Or for example, he takes an oath that he will not speak to Zayd's servant, but the servant becomes free. The oath, however, still stands because he has specified that particular person. So we say when you specify something in your oath, then we go by that. So this is the case as long as he has not intended otherwise, in which case we resort to his intention. So with the shirt example, he says, Wallahi, he will not wear this shirt, as long as he intended that he will not wear this shirt as long as it is in a shirt format, then we will go by that intention. So if he now was to wear the shirt as an izar or as something else, let's say a head wrap, then he would not have broken the oath, because we go by the intention. We could say the same thing with the sabab, as long as there is no sabab which is interfering in this oath. For example, a man might say, Wallahi, I will not speak to the wife of this man. And then this wife is divorced from this man. Is he now allowed to speak to her? Well, normally we would say no, because he has specified this woman, so he's not allowed to speak to her. However, it could be that the reason or the sabab for him making this oath would be that if he speaks to the wife of this man, then this man would become angry because of his ghairah, or because of his protective jealousy. So this is the reason why he took this oath. But now that this woman is no longer his wife, he can speak to her. So because of this sabab, he would not have broken the oath if he speaks to this woman after she is divorced. Okay, so we have discussed the 3 ports of calls, but there is a 4th one if the other 3 are not feasible. And this is where we look at the words used in the oath and apply it to one of 3 modes of meaning. This could be the shar'i meaning, the Lorawi meaning, which is the linguistic term, or the urfi meaning, which is the meaning used in the customs of the people. So these are 3 ways in which a word could be understood. And we've spoken about this topic before. For example, in the acts of worship, we said that salah in the linguistic term means making dua, but in the shar'i term, it is an act of devotion to Allah Jalla wa Ala, using specific actions and wordings which begin with takbir and ends in taslim. So if a Muslim uses a word which has a shar'i meaning different to that of the linguistic meaning or the urfi meaning, then it needs to be carried on the shar'i meaning, because he's a mu'min. And this is what is apparent, unless he intends otherwise, or unless there is some other sabab which we spoke about earlier on. So if he takes an oath that he would perform the salah, then we have to carry it on the shar'i meaning. We don't carry it on the linguistic meaning, which is dua. The word hajj in the linguistic term means to intend to do something, but in the shar'i term it is an act of worship in which you intend to go to the house of Allah Jalla wa Ala and to perform specific rituals. However, if a person takes an oath that he will perform hajj today, and there's no way that he could go to Mecca this very day because he's living in another country, then we cannot carry this on the shar'i meaning. We would have to carry it on the linguistic meaning, that he intends to go somewhere. So if today he goes to the house of his friend and he says this is what the hajj was, to intend to go to the house of the friend, then he would not have broken the oath, simply because there's no way we could carry this word hajj on the shar'i meaning. Or perhaps it is not Dhul Hijjah such that you could perform the hajj, so it's impossible to carry it on the shar'i meaning. And when we carry the word on its shar'i meaning, then the action needs to take place in accordance with the sharia, such that if the action does not take place in accordance with the sharia, then its presence is like its absence. So if, for example, a person says that I will carry out a bay' or a sales transaction today, then this bay' needs to be carried on the shar'i meaning, as long as this person is a Muslim, of course. And the bay' or the sales in the shar'i version is slightly different to that in the linguistic version, because the bay' in the sharia is when you exchange wealth for wealth. But wealth in the sharia is of a specific type. It's not just any wealth, such that if you were to sell alcohol, then this would not be a bay' in the sharia, and its presence is like its absence. Therefore, it does not hold true that you have carried out a sales transaction or a bay' if you were to sell alcohol. Likewise, selling pork or dead meat or idols. So if a man says, Wallahi, I will not sell anything today, and he goes on to sell alcohol, then he has not broken the oath, because indeed he has not sold anything. Because in the sharia, selling alcohol, or any khamr for that matter, is not a sales transaction. Its presence is like its absence. much like performing your salah without your wudu. Its presence is like its absence. So we say, as long as it is a Muslim who is uttering this oath, then we take his words on the Shari'i meaning. However, what about if he says this, Wallahi, I will not sell khamr today, and then he sells the khamr. Has he broken the oath? Well, definitely from the Shari'i standpoint of view, he has not carried out a sales transaction, because selling khamr is not a sales transaction in accordance with the Sharia, even if it is in the linguistic sense. However, here he particularly mentioned khamr, so he restricted the oath here. So now if he sells khamr, he has broken the oath. Some other scholars say that if he was to sell the khamr in this particular case, he would not have broken the oath, because khamr is not sold in the Sharia aslan. So the word sell and khamr cannot go together, it would be a contradiction. Hence in the Sharia it is simply impossible to sell khamr. In the same way, if he was to say that I will not color music. Music is something which is listened to or heard. It is not something which is colored in, like a coloring book. It is simply impossible. So in the same way, they say it is impossible in the Sharia to sell khamr. So we have two opinions on this issue. Those scholars who go by the image of the trade itself, or the physical action of trading, they would say that he has broken the oath because he restricted it to the khamr, and this is a sales transaction. Those scholars who go by the reality in the Sharia, they say that no, this is a contradictory statement, hence he has not broken the oath. The Hanbali madhab says that he has broken the oath because they go by the physical action of the trade transaction. Otherwise, if he leaves it in an absolute sense, unrestricted sense, he says I will not sell anything, and then he goes on to sell khamr, then the matter is far clearer. He has not broken the oath. Let's take another example on this issue. A man has a building which he can let to another person to run as a shop, let's say, and the owner of the building says, Wallahi, I will not rent out this building or this shop of mine for somebody who would deal in riba, meaning in the shop or in this premise of mine. But then after that, he does rent out this building or this premise of his to somebody who deals in riba. Has he broken the oath? Well, we have two opinions, like we said before. Those people who just go by the physical action of renting out, they would say yes, he has broken the oath because he has given this building of his to somebody who would deal in riba, but he took an oath beforehand that he would not do so. So therefore he's broken the oath. So they'd go by the outer appearance of the transaction. Other scholars would say no, this is not an ijara, a leasing contract. Because in ijara, a leasing contract can only be for something which is permissible. But doing it for riba is evidently not permissible, therefore this is not an ijara. Hence, he has not broken the oath. And leasing something out for riba purposes is a contradiction in the Sharia at least. Hence, its presence is like its absence, so he has not broken the oath. So this is the issue pertaining to the Shari'i meaning. What about the Lorawi meaning, or the linguistic meaning? This is the sort of meaning you may find in a lexicon. So if, for example, a person says, and he takes an oath that he would not eat lahm, and then he goes and eats the fat of an animal, then he has not broken the oath because the word lahm does not include fat in the Arabic language. However, if he uses the word lahm, which is meat, but he intends the whole of the animal, then he has broken the oath, because remember, our first port of call is the niyyah, or the intention. If he takes an oath that he will not consume any condiments, and then let's say he drinks vinegar or consumes salt, then he has broken the oath because salt and vinegar and other things of this sort are used as condiments by the people. If he takes an oath by saying, Wallahi, I will not wear anything, then the style of this language is that it includes absolutely anything which he wears. So if he wears anything, he would have broken the oath, whether it is large or little. If he says, Wallahi, I will not speak to anyone, then he breaks his oath by speaking to even one person, because this is what the language dictates. What if he says, Wallahi, I will not sell my car, but then he appoints a wakil, or somebody to do it on his behalf? Has he broken the oath? The answer is yes, because the wakil takes his place. So it is exactly the same as him selling his car. It's just that he didn't do it directly, but he did sell his car nevertheless, because the wakil could not have sold the car except with the permission of the owner. However, we need to bring the intention into this as well. If he has the intention that he will not sell the car directly himself, then yes, he has not broken the oath, because we have to go by his intention. Remember, that's the first port of call. Why would he want to make this intention, not to sell it directly? He could have a reason. It could be he wants to sell something, but the people who are the potential buyers may not want to buy it from him. So he appoints a wakil to sell it on his behalf. It may be that the buyers have something personal against the owner of the product, or it could be that the buyers have tremendous respect for the owner of the product. Hence they would want to pay him more, and he does not want an increase in the price. So there could be reasons that he does not want to sell this item directly. What if he takes an oath that he will not pray the Salat al-Duha today, and then he appoints a wakil to do it on his behalf? Then here he has not broken the oath, because you cannot pray on behalf of someone else. Because if somebody prays Salat al-Duha for you, then you certainly have not gained any benefit from that. Because the Salah is an individual and personal act of worship. You cannot appoint a wakil to do it on your behalf, as opposed to a sales transaction. What about the urfi, or the customary usage of a word? Sometimes the customary usage could differ from the linguistic usage of a word. And this would normally apply to those people who do not have too much knowledge of Islam, and they are not particularly educated. So the words they would use are most likely to refer to the customary usage. So to take an example in the Arabic language, al-rawiya in the language means a camel which carries water. But in customary terms, it is a large water container. So if an ammi, a person not particularly educated in the language nor in the deen, he says, Wallahi, I will not buy a rawiya, and then he goes and buys a large water container, then he has broken the oath, because he has gone against the oath, and the word rawiya is carried on the customary usage. But if he buys a camel which carries water, then he has not broken the oath, even though a rawiya in the language is a camel which carries water. But because he is an ammi, we carry his words on the customary usage, not on the linguistic usage. But if we have a clash between the linguistic usage or the customary usage, which one do we give precedence to? Well, we give precedence to the customary usage because this is most often the case in a particular custom. It is that the people go by the customary usage, not necessarily the linguistic usage. And we must go by what is more often the case, not what is less often the case. Another example is the verb wati'ah, which means to step on something. But when you make wat of your house, it means to enter the house. So if a man says that, Wallahi, I will not make wat of my house, and then if he was to enter the house, he would have broken the oath. But if he says that with the wat I meant step on the house, so I will not step on my house, then this is clearly impossible. Because it is impossible to step on your house. The house is bigger than your foot. How can you step on your house? When you make wat of your house, you enter the house. So even in the Arabic language, where wati'a means to step on something, it would be impossible to step on your house. And the only way this could be understood is that you enter your house. So the basic point is that the customary usage takes precedence over the linguistic usage. Here's another issue. A man says that I will not drink this particular drink. And then what he does is that he takes this drink and mixes it in with other drinks such that he changes this drink and then he drinks it, meaning the mixture. Has he broken the oath? The answer is no, because it doesn't hold true that he is drinking that initial drink, because he's changed it substantially in terms of the color, taste and smell of the drink. The Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّ الْمَاءَ طَهُورٌ لَا يُنَجِّسُهُ شَيْءٌ إِلَّا مَا غَلَبَ عَلَى طَعْمِهِ أَوْ لَوْنِهِ أَوْ رِيحِهِ بِنَجَاسَةٍ تَحْدُثُ فِيهِ. Water is purifying, nothing makes it impure except that which overcomes it in terms of the taste or color or smell with a najasa which enters in upon it. So here the water turns from purifying water to impure water, which you cannot make wudu from. So the point is that this liquid can change with its changing taste, color, or smell. If he says, Wallahi, I will not eat butter, but then he eats a food item which contains butter, but not enough so as to make the taste of the butter apparent, then he has not broken the oath, because the butter is not the dominant food here, such that it holds true that he has eaten butter, as opposed to, let's say, butter bread, in which case clearly the butter is quite dominant. Or for example, he says, I will not eat egg, but then he eats a slice of cake. Now we know cake is made from egg. Has he broken the oath? The answer is no, because the egg has been overcome with the other ingredients such that it does not hold true that he is eating egg. Rather, he is eating the cake, as opposed to, let's say, eating omelette, in which case clearly he would have broken the oath. What about this issue? A man says, Wallahi, I will not speak to Zayd. But then something happens and he becomes extremely angry at Zayd and rebukes him because of his anger. Has he broken the oath? Well, we need to look at the intention here. If his intention was, I will not speak to Zayd whilst I am in a normal frame of mind, so just like a normal speech, then he has not broken the oath. So, for example, we know that there will be people on Yawm al-Qiyamah that Allah Jalla wa Ala will not look at, will not speak to, and will not purify. But despite that, He will say to them, as we read in the Quran, قَالَ اخْسَأُوا فِيهَا وَلَا تُكَلِّمُونَ. He will say to them, be despised and rejected therein, meaning in Jahannam, and do not speak to me. So clearly He is communicating with them, is He not? But this is not the normal type of speech. This is a speech of rebuke. So basically the point is we need to look at his intention. What if he takes an oath to do something haram? For example, he says, Wallahi, I will sell khamr. Well, we tell him it is haram for you to sell khamr, therefore it is wajib for you not to carry out this oath. But the oath is still effective. So what you do is that you do not carry out this oath and you offer the kafara. If he takes an oath not to do something, and then he does that particular action out of forgetfulness or ignorance, then there is no himth upon him, so he has not broken the oath, and hence there is no kafara upon him. Because the kafara is as a ta'deeb, or to give you a punishment and to lick some etiquettes into you for breaking the oath. So if a man says, Wallahi, I will not wear this particular clothing, and then at night time when it is dark, he cannot see the item of clothing and he picks it up and wears it, but he does not know that this was the clothing upon which he took the oath, then he does not break the oath, and there is no kafara upon him because he did this out of ignorance. When you break the oath, for a kafara to be obligatory, you must have broken it alim, dhakir and mukhtar. Knowingly, you remembered it and you chose to do it as opposed to being forced. Because Allah says, رَبَّنَا لَا تُؤَاخِذْنَا إِن نَسِينَا أَوْ أَخْطَأْنَا. What about matters of divorce and freeing a servant? So a man says, if I wear this particular item of clothing, then my wife is divorced. And then if he forgetfully wears this item of clothing, some scholars say that the wife is divorced even if he does it forgetfully. Likewise with freeing a servant. So he says, if I wear this qamis, then my servant is freed. And he wears this qamis forgetfully or out of ignorance, then some scholars say that the servant is freed. The reason for this is that they say that both of these acts, meaning the divorce and the freeing of a servant, they are pertaining to another human being or the rights of another human being. And these human rights cannot be dropped just because you forgot or were ignorant. Rather, they remain effective. However, this reasoning is not very clear when it comes to divorce, because it could be that the wife does not want to be divorced. In fact, if she is divorced, this would be a stain on her reputation. So how can we obligate the divorce now? And the correct opinion on this issue is that this type of statement, if I wear this clothing, then my wife is divorced or my servant is freed, this takes the ruling of an oath. So it's as if he is saying, Wallahi, I will not wear this clothing. Hence, if he does wear the clothing, we would simply say that you have broken the oath and you pay the kafara for the oath, and your wife is not divorced nor your servant freed, because this was not his intention. His intention was not to make the wife divorced or the servant freed. It was to refrain from wearing this item of clothing. Hence this takes the ruling of a yameen or an oath. And on the other opinion, which says that the wife is divorced or the servant is freed, they would say that he has broken the oath, hence the wife is going to be freed, but they do not say that he has to offer the kafara for breaking the oath. So how is it that you can break the oath and still not offer the kafara? This appears to be inconsistent. So the correct opinion is that even with cases of divorce and freeing of a servant, we take it to be a yameen or an oath, unless of course he intends the divorce or he intends the freeing of a servant, in which case it's a different issue, because we go by the intention. What about if he orders somebody else to do or not do something? For example, he says to his son, if you wear this qamis, then I will divorce your mother, meaning he will divorce his wife. Let's say his son now wears this shirt out of forgetfulness or out of ignorance. Is the wife divorced? The answer is no, because remember, forgetfulness and ignorance is an excuse and prevents the kafara. But even if the son wears it intentionally, if the man's intention was simply to prevent his son from wearing this qamis, then we say no, the wife is not divorced. Rather, this is an oath, and he has broken his oath. Therefore, the person, meaning the man who took the oath, needs to offer the kafara. That's it. But a man can take an oath against his son because he has authority over his son, and it is likely that the son will do as his father wants him to do. But what if he takes an oath against someone else who simply does not care about his oath, unlike his son? If he takes an oath against somebody whom he does not have authority over, let's say in the street he meets a man who is carrying a heavy load, and he says to him, Wallahi, you will not carry this heavy load, and the man does carry the heavy load, then has the first person broken his oath? Some scholars say yes, he has, but it appears the correct opinion is that he has not, if the intention was to honor this man, not as a means of obligating him to do something or obligating him not to do something. So if you take an oath against somebody by means of honoring and he breaks your oath, then there is no kafara upon you, because the kafara is as a means of atonement for breaking the oath and as a means of instilling discipline into you. But this does not apply here if your intention is an honoring, because for the man to say, Wallahi, you will not carry this heavy load, it's the equivalent of him saying, Wallahi, I will honor you. And this honoring has taken place. And we can illustrate this with an example. When the Prophet ﷺ came in late for the prayer, Abu Bakr was leading it, and Abu Bakr stepped back to let the Prophet lead the prayer, and the Prophet then ordered Abu Bakr not to step back but continue leading the prayer, but Abu Bakr refused and stepped back and made the Prophet come forward and lead the prayer. So we ask ourselves the question now, is Abu Bakr responsible for disobeying the Prophet? Because clearly he has directly gone against the wish of the Prophet. We say no, this is not usyan or disobedience, rather Abu Bakr did not obey the Prophet as a means of honoring the Prophet, not as a means of disobeying him and being rebellious. So if this difference is understood, then similarly, in the case of an oath, it needs to be understood that if he takes an oath against somebody as a means of honoring, and then that person against whom the oath is taken does not follow the oath, then the taker of the oath is not responsible. However, there is another related issue about taking an oath against somebody you don't have authority over, and your intention for taking the oath is not to honor him this time, it is to obligate him. Now some ulama say that in this particular case, if this person was to go against your oath, even out of forgetfulness or out of ignorance, there would still be a kafara upon you. Whereas with the case of the son, which we mentioned earlier, there would be no kafara. And the reason for this difference they give is, it is not correct for you to be obligating him with anything because you don't have authority over him. Hence this situation would become like a condition and that which is conditioned. So when you obligate him with this oath, it is as if you are saying that if this action occurs, then I will offer the kafara. Or on the condition that this action occurs, the kafara is obligatory upon me. The kafara for the oath. So as soon as this action happens, then the kafara becomes obligatory, and this has nothing to do with whether he does this action out of forgetfulness or ignorance. So to illustrate this, you tell another man upon whom you do not have authority, Wallahi, you will not enter this house. and you're not doing this as ikram or honoring, you're doing this as ilzam, to obligate him. Now, this is the same as you saying, upon the condition that this man enters this house, the kafara will be obligatory upon me. So whether this man enters the house forgetfully or not forgetfully, the kafara is obligatory upon you, because you had no authority on him in the first place such that you could obligate him. Okay, let's take another issue. What if he takes an oath to do something and he only does part of it? So for example, he says, Wallahi, I will eat this loaf of bread, and then he manages to eat half of it or a quarter of it, but not the whole of it. Has he broken the oath? Here, what is apparent is that he has not broken the oath unless his intention was to eat part of the bread or anything of the bread. So if by eat he meant taste, then yes, he has broken the oath, even if he eats half of the bread or quarter of the bread or anything of the bread. But if he didn't have any particular intention and he was just going by the words alone, then just taking the words alone without the intention, we would say if he eats half of the bread or 3/4 or quarter, he has not broken the oath. Rather, he would only have broken the oath if he eats the whole of the loaf. Similarly, if we have an indication which tells us that he could not intend the whole of it. For example, he says, Wallahi, I will not drink the water of this river. Clearly, he could not intend the whole of the river. That would be impossible. So here now, if he was to drink even a little cup of water from this river, he would have broken the oath. Because in this particular scenario, we have a strong indication which tells us that he could not be intending the whole of the river. What if he says, Wallahi, I will not eat the bread made from this baker, and he eats a little bit of bread from him? Does he break the oath? Here it appears he does break the oath, because it's impossible to eat every piece of bread made from this baker. However, it could come down to the sabab, or the cause, because maybe the reason why he took this oath is because this baker puts too much salt in the bread, or he does something which is wrong, and he does not like the bread. But then afterwards, if the baker changes his methodology and makes good bread, and then he eats from this baker, has he broken the oath? The answer is no, because remember what we said about the sabab of the oath. So these are the important points to remember here. The first one is the intention of the oath taker. The second one is the sabab. The third one is the ta'yin, or when he specifies a particular item. And the fourth point is how we carry the word. Shar'i meaning, the urfi or customary usage, or the linguistic usage. Okay, let's take some review questions. So question number 1. In the context of an oath, explain the difference between ikram and ilzam, stating the difference with regards to breaking such an oath. Question number 2. What is the 4-step method of interpreting an oath? Question number 3. If a person takes an oath, Wallahi, I will not eat egg, and then he eats a cake which is made from egg, has he broken the oath? Explain your answer.